Hey, what's up folks, Inspired here, and I got something special for you today. As you may know, this year 2025 marks the 25th anniversary since the release of the original SmackDown games on PlayStation 1. To celebrate that, I interviewed Yuke's, the developers of the SmackDown games, and asked them a lot of questions on the development process and their experience working on those games. The full interview is available in the text format and you will find the link in the description, but in this video I want to highlight some of the answers and give a bit of extra info, so keep watching if you're interested in that. Now, for those of you who don't know, Yuke's is a Japanese video game development company that was founded in 1993. In the 90s, they were mostly known for their New Japan Pro Wrestling games, such as the Tokon Redstone series on Sony PlayStation and Sega Dreamcast. In 1999, they started working on WWE games and worked on them for 19 years up until 2018. The first two games in the main PlayStation series were WWF SmackDown and WWF SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, both released for PlayStation 1 in 2000. These are the two games that we'll be covering in this interview. On behalf of Yuke's, our questions will be answered by Osamu Hashimoto, who has been with the company for 26 years and worked as a game designer on both SmackDown and SmackDown 2. The first thing I wanted to know was what for him was the biggest challenge in his work on the SmackDown games. Curiously, but perhaps not surprisingly, he says that besides learning the American wrestling style, the hardest part for him was adapting to the Western PlayStation controls. Because in Japanese games you usually press circle to accept and cross to cancel, while in Western games it's of course cross to accept and circle or triangle to cancel. So it usually takes a lot of time to switch between these two systems if you're only used to one of them. I was also curious about his favorite feature in the original SmackDown games, and his response was button sensitivity, meaning that it's very easy to learn how to play the games and perform moves. He says that he had got to play some of the existing US wrestling games while working on SmackDown, and their controls were all super hard, so Yuke specifically wanted to design a game that would be easy to play by anyone. He doesn't mention which exact games he played, but my personal guess would be the WWF Acclaim games, probably Warzone and Attitude, which to these days are notorious for their bad controls. I also wanted to know what new features or improvements he would have added to the games given a chance, and again, perhaps unsurprisingly, his top choices were better entrances and reduced loading times. These are definitely two aspects of the games that could be frustrating to many players, especially loading times in SmackDown 2. Speaking of which, Hashimoto actually explained that the reason why loading times are so bad in the second game was essentially because of the CD limitations and just how much data there was on the disc in total. Personally, I also like the fact that he gives a shout out to AKI here when talking about entrances. It's nice to know that even though they were competitors, there was still professional respect between the companies, and apparently Yuke's employees even played AKI games a lot. Speaking of Yuke's employees, I was wondering just how many of them were actually wrestling fans at the time, and according to Hashimoto, every single person working on the original SmackDown games either was a fan already or became a fan during the development process. Now, of course, Yuke's developed the SmackDown games, but they did not publish them outside of Japan. The international publisher was THQ, an American company, so I wanted to know whether there were any difficulties in communication between Yuke's and THQ back in those early days. But apparently the partnership was pretty smooth from the beginning, as both companies were large enough to have full-time interpreters, and the only problems were with bug reports, because of course in those days you couldn't just send videos over the internet as easily as you can do now. Something I always found curious is the fact that Yuke's stopped developing NJPW games around the same time they started working on WWE games in '99. So I asked Hashimoto whether the deal with WWE and THQ affected Yuke's relationship with NJPW, and whose decision it was to stop releasing Tokon Redstone games. Sadly, he didn't know for sure, but he thinks that it wouldn't have been Yuke's decision because they are usually not the ones to turn down work like that. So based on that, we can assume that it must have been NJPW's decision. I also asked Hashimoto whether there was any truth to the rumors that Yuke's was working on a WCW game in 1998. This was actually reported by GameSpot at the time. However, he didn't know anything about this either and said that this wasn't true. Back to the SmackDown games, I was curious about the art side and texture creation, and it turns out that THQ provided photos of wrestlers, while Yuke's themselves actually took pictures of arenas and backstage environments, which were then adapted if necessary. I found this footage from the Yuke's office with some of those photos, and you can actually see that these exact pictures of Kane and Triple H were likely used for their textures in SmackDown 1. A pretty cool feature introduced in SmackDown 2 that later became a staple of the series was the preset movesets in the Create a Superstar mode, based on wrestlers who were not in the game and even not in WWE at the time. According to Hashimoto, it was an idea of someone from Yuke's who was extremely knowledgeable about wrestling, and naturally THQ did sign off on this, as well as on the original unknown characters that sometimes appear in the season mode and whom you have to beat to unlock those movesets and hidden core parts. Something else that not many people outside of Japan know is the fact that alongside the SmackDown games, Yuke's also released 2 Japan-only games for PS1 using the same engine. They were called The Pro Wrestling and The Pro Wrestling 2. The first game was rather bare bones, but the second had some really unique features, such as barbed wire and Inferno matches, so I asked Hashimoto whether any of that was ever considered for the SmackDown games. According to him, they might have considered Inferno matches for SmackDown 1, but as we know, they never got around to implementing that. As for barbed wire and all the other The Pro Wrestling 2 features, they were never planned for SmackDown, and it was basically just Yuke's trying to make the game more unique while working on a limited budget. What is more or less well known is the fact that several characters were cut from SmackDown 2 during development. The 2 regular roster members, Big Show and Ken Shamrock, and 4 legends, Andre the Giant, Bob Backlund, Jerry Lawler, and Sergeant Slaughter. The models for all of them still exist in the game files and can be accessed with modding or GameShark codes. I did ask Hashimoto about that, but sadly he didn't remember any details. However, based on the info that we currently have, we can say that removing Shaw and Shamrock was probably WWE's decision due to the fact that they were no longer on TV at the time. As for the legends, I would guess it had to do with the limited disk space, something that we already mentioned previously. Adding their music and Titantron videos would have likely pushed the game size beyond the CD-ROM limit. Something else that was cut from SmackDown 2 was a lot of season mode content, including cutscenes and text lines, most notably this cutscene with The Undertaker riding his motorcycle. It still exists in the game files and can be accessed with modding or GameShark codes. According to Hashimoto, the biker version of The Undertaker was a late addition during the SmackDown 2 development, so sadly they just didn't have enough time to finish the cutscene properly. SmackDown 2 files also have a lot of unused voice lines from Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler that sound like commentary. For example, these.
It looks like this ring can't hold all the action tonight.
This match is about to go outside the ring.
This contest will continue.
Next thing you know, they'll end up backstage.
He goes down like a ton of bricks.
Ow! That had to hurt.
However, Hashimoto is pretty sure that they didn't have commentary planned because it was too difficult to have both commentary and background music at the same time on PS1 due to its slow CD reading speed. So these voice lines were probably intended for the season mode, but most of them ended up unused due to time constraints. Something else I was curious about was whether or not Yuke's made Owen Hart's model for the original SmackDown before Owen's tragic death in '99, and Hashimoto was able to confirm for me that they did in fact have his model made. I always suspected that they might have done it because we know that the game started development in early '99, and some of the attires are clearly from before the Over the Edge pay-per-view, when Owen's accident happened. So it does make sense for them to have worked on Owen's model at the time. Sadly, we will probably never get to see that official model, but it's still interesting to know that it exists. Another curious thing about the early SmackDown games is the fact that all the wrestlers have certain stats assigned to them, but these stats are never shown in-game. You have to look in the game files to know what they are. I asked Hashimoto why the decision was made, and he explained that it was a deliberate choice because they didn't want to compare characters by stats. They just wanted wrestling fans to enjoy the game without having to worry about selecting the strongest character, because it's a whole different debate on who is actually stronger than whom. They figured just play as whoever you like and don't worry about that. So there you go, folks, these were the 15 questions that I wanted to highlight in this video. Again, there are more questions and answers in the full interview, so be sure to check that out. The link is in the description. Also, let me know what you think of this interview in the comments, and who knows, there might be part 2 or maybe an interview on later games down the line, so if you have any questions of your own, you can post them as well. Thank you all for watching, cheers!